So hey everyone, welcome to today's Shedcast. I decided that today I had an article that I found the other day. Just randomly, I find these articles every once in a while, and I thought it was interesting enough that I needed to share it with you. And today we're going to talk about the top 15 lawn myths that you might not know. Some of them you might know. I wanted to share them because I think there's stuff here that applies to everyone, no matter where you live, north regions, south regions, all of the areas in between here. If you see me looking down here on the screen, I have my computer here just to go over some of the notes. And also, I will have timestamps down in the description if you want to skip ahead to certain things that you see in the video. Or if you'd like to get through this a little faster, then go ahead and speed up the actual video itself if you don't mind me sounding like a chipmunk. So this article comes from Aaron Patton. He's assistant professor, turfgrass specialist, University of Arkansas, at least as far as when this was written. Some of these are specific to Arkansas that are on this list, so I've left those out and chosen the 15 that I think we can share with everyone here and that applies to pretty much everyone. So a bonus right off the bat, and actually I'm going to break my title and give you one extra myth here, and that has been that many people that are just getting into lawn care don't quite understand the differences between warm season grasses, cool season grasses, and that not all grass is created equal. So a lot of people see what I'm doing in my yard up here in Iowa, and they might live in Texas or they might live in Florida, and they sort of assume that they can do the exact same things right away. They can do the exact same grass types, and that's just not the case. So the first thing that you need to do when you're first getting into lawn care is understand warm season grasses versus cool season grasses. We'll talk about both of these today throughout these myths here, both grass types in certain situations, but number one is grass is not all created equal, so understand your grass type. If you don't know what your grass type is, just do a Google search for your area and grass types. Go out into your lawn and compare some photos, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find something close to what you have. Most lawns here up in the north have a mix of grasses, and that's totally fine too. You don't have to have one grass type as far as cool season goes. But that's number one, is know your grass type, and not all grass types are created equal. So let's get to the article here now, and these are not in any specific order. One of these myths is not any more important than the other. I just put them all in a list, so it doesn't really matter. Number one, if you let your turf grass seed heads grow in your lawn and then mow them off, they will germinate and grow. So I get this question a lot, especially now during this time frame, because cool season lawns are going to seed right now. And a lot of people think that there's a weed coming up in their lawn or something is happening to their grass and they're confused by it. And this is just a process of the plant that happens every year. For cool season lawn, it's usually going to be in the late springtime when you're going to see some of these seed heads. And this is just completely normal. That's just a process that the plant goes through. So a lot of people think, well, if all that seed is going to be there, then maybe I could just let this grow up, or I could mow off those seed heads into the lawn and they're going to end up being grass seed. Well, according to this article and everything that I've done for research as well, says that seed heads need to mature on the stem for several months in order to germinate. That would pretty much mean allowing your lawn to grow for 2 to 3 months, which in most places would probably be about waist high at that point. And most likely you're going to be getting in some trouble if you live in a suburban area. So it's not really a good option. And also from all the research that I've done, most of those seed heads that are on that grass plant itself are going to be sterile and are not going to produce any seed that's going to do anything anyway. So if you're in that seed head stage right now, then the best thing that you could possibly do is just continue to mow them off. So if they're in that seed head stage, then you're going to need a sharp blade on your mower, because these plants can get a little stocky and it can actually dull your mower blade quite quickly. So make sure that you have your mower blade sharp. For warm season grasses down in the south, let's say you have Bermuda, you will see most of your seed heads in the midsummer when your lawn is actively growing the most in that heat. Number two, I will not have to mow as often if I mow my lawn shorter. There's a lot of people who don't like to mow. There's a lot of people who don't like lawn care, and that's totally fine. It's up to you what you enjoy spending your time doing in your property. But I can say that many people ask me, what's number one on your list, Ryan, of improving my lawn? If you could tell me one thing to do right off the bat, what would it be? And I would say stop mowing your grass off at 2 inches and then allowing it to get to 5 inches again, and then mowing again at 2 inches. This is going to stress the lawn all of the time, and especially in the summertime for cool season grass here. If you are stressing out the plant already when it's in a stress situation from summer heat, then this is when weeds invade. This is when the plant gets really stressed out and the lawn gets thin, and you're going to have nothing but problems. So what can you do about that? Well, the actual simple answer is just raise the height on your mower. This comes down to the 1/3 rule, which is that you should not cut off more than 1/3 of a grass blade when you mow. So what happens if you'd still like to mow only every 2 weeks is if you'd set your mower to 4 inches, and let's say it gets to 6 or 7 even by that point, but then you come down and mow it at 4 inches, you're not creating nearly the amount of stress that you would be if you come out with a 6 and 7 inch lawn and you cut it down to 2 inches. So for some of you though, down in the south with Bermuda or zoysia, these are grasses that don't really like to be cut up that tall, and you're just going to have to be out there mowing more often with these grass types to keep them lower. They're going to be more dense, they're going to look better at these lower heights. So for you guys, a lower height is a little better. So for cool season though, to reiterate, if you can't get out and mow as often as you'd like, maybe only once a week or a little bit more than that, then raise that height up so that when you do mow, you're not creating as much stress on the plant. All right, to the next myth here. If I set my mower on the lowest setting, it will look like a golf course. So a lot of people see what I'm doing in my lawn here and they're very confused why I'm cutting it so short. So for me, I have an actual reel mower, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But mowing on the lowest setting of your rotary mower is a whole lot different than using a reel mower. And also, the grass types that I've chosen for my lawn are able to be mowed lower, and they're actually designed for this and can tolerate that. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have more maintenance, because I do. I have to be mowing every other day, sometimes every day. And I have to be doing a lot more in terms of watching the lawn for applying lower amounts of fertilizer more often, doing more to watch out for fungus and things like that. So the point of this myth here and talking about it was that do not just go out and use your rotary mower or your regular mower and cut it on the lowest setting and think it's going to look like a golf course, because the lower you go with those mowers, the more the blade is just spinning around really close to the ground, and it just tends to rip at the grass and tear at the grass, and you're not going to get a very good clean cut. And also, it doesn't have rollers on it like a reel mower does, so it's going to be much easier to scalp the lawn as well. This is just going to cause it to look uneven, unhealthy, and is not going to work well. So unless you have the specialized equipment, unless you have the proper grass types for it, and unless you are willing to do the maintenance, do not set your mower at the lowest height and go out and mow and think it will look like a golf course. Next one is kind of related to golf as well, and that's that I need a putting green in my backyard. Now, this has been a dream of mine actually for quite a while, and it's something that I know I will make happen at some point, but I'm not the typical person that this article is going after. So this is going after people who love golf. They love to have a backyard green in their lawn, and that would be pretty amazing, but you need to understand that there's a lot of maintenance that goes into greens. There's a lot of maintenance in the grass types. So for us here up north and even down into the south, you would be using a grass called creeping bent grass for the most part. This grass is awesome because it spreads and can be cut very, very low for greens height. The ball rolls really well on it. But the problem is that it's really high in maintenance. It needs a lot of different things during the heat to stay alive. Needs a lot of fungicide to prevent all these fungus problems from happening, and it's just one of those grasses that can be really finicky. So that's really the reason here that they're talking about this in this article, is that most people don't understand the maintenance that would go into owning an actual grass green. If you understand all these things, I love this, it says in the last sentence here, if you're still undeterred, so basically if you've read all this about building a green, you still want to do it anyway, then make sure you do it right. There's an actual process in how to build a green, what materials you need to use, how to deal with the drainage, and all of that stuff. So if you're going to do it, then look up how to do it right. Make sure you do it right from the start, and that way you won't have as many problems. All right, next one on the list is I must have a white grub problem if I have moles in my lawn. So I'm still dealing with a mole, or a couple of them in my lawn as well, and in the garden area. And basically, a lot of people told me when I made my video about that this spring is that, oh, I must have white grubs, and that's exactly what this article is talking about. But actually, I've been using a preventative for a few years now. I haven't really had any major issue with that, except for 4 or 5 years ago, I had a few spots of grub damage that I took care of, but other than that, I've been using a preventative. Whenever I dig into the lawn or garden area, we don't really see any problems there. But this article makes a good point in that most of the time, moles' main source of food are earthworms. I have a million of those in my lawn. The last time I watered my yard, I went outside in the morning and there were just earthworms covering it everywhere. Especially in my soil here, it's pretty typical to have a lot of earthworms. They do cause some issue with mounds and different things that are annoying with them, especially on low-cut turf like I have. But for the most part, I don't really intervene with these or do anything with them. So if you're going to continue to have that in your lawn, you may have a mole problem anyway. So I haven't really found a good way of getting rid of them completely, but in the article here, it talks about using traps as the best method to get rid of them. So the next one actually is related to moles as well, and since we're talking about that topic. So the myth is that you can use chewing gum to kill moles. Now, I actually saw this quite a bit in the comments of my last video about moles as well, is that people said, I used some gum. It seemed like it got rid of them. They eat it, and then it does something to them to where they can't digest it, and that's the end of the moles. So in the article here, it talked about that a lot of people put these in the tunnels in the early spring, but then by the time the soil starts to dry out, it starts to get warmer as we get towards summer. The moles start to dive deeper, and they're not as much at the surface at this point. So most people think they got rid of them when in reality, they're probably just down deeper into the soil at that point. So again, to reiterate, in this article, it talks about traps being the best method to get rid of moles. Next on the list is it's best to fertilize in the spring since that is when the home improvement stores sell fertilizer. So you probably heard on the radio or by the time you go to Lowe's or Home Depot in the springtime that there's fertilizer everywhere. On the radio, it might say, oh, it's been a long time, winter coming, you need to feed your lawn. So yes and no, depending on some situations. If you're in the south and your lawn hasn't even really woken up yet until it gets pretty warm, then obviously early spring is not really a time to feed it. If you're up here in the cool season land, then the only thing that can happen with a really early spring fertilizer or even one mid-spring is that most of the time we get a lot of rain, not typical this year, but most of the time we do, and it's hard to get out and mow the lawn consistently. So if you dump that fertilizer on and it's growing like crazy, which it's going to do most of the time in spring anyway, you're going to quickly run into an issue where you can't keep up with the mowing. You're going to have a lot of excessive growth. So you'd rather be sending the energy into the root system at this point, getting things ready for summer, than causing a ton of excessive growth on the top. So my program is something that I talk about in my lawn guide as well, is to use the fall for your heavy feeding for cool season lawn. You can keep up with the mowing a lot better because you're going into the cooler part of the year. Things are starting to slow down. Just works a lot better, and then next spring when you come out of it, if you've done your fall fertilizer, grass will be ready to go on its own and you don't need to dump a bunch on in the early spring. Now again, just to quickly talk about the warm season, you're going to be fertilizing most of your stuff in the summer or in the hotter part of the year because your lawn is going to be most active when you're actually in the hottest weather. So for you guys, I know it's going to be fun to be out there when it's 100 trying to do your lawn work, but that's sort of when things are really the best time for you to take care of your lawn. Next on the list is it's best to seed in the spring. So I've done so many videos on this over the years because it's a question that I get all of the time. People get out of the winter time, they're ready to go out, and a lot of times they think, okay, my yard doesn't look that good right now. I should put some seed on it and I should get it going that way. And most of the time you just have to understand the expectations of this. It's not that you can't do it or that it's not completely recommended. It's just that you have to understand getting that grass seed through the summer heat on that first year is going to be kind of difficult. So I'm talking about cool season grass here as well. Now, if you're down in the south, most people also get confused that most of your grasses are going to spread on their own. There's not really a whole lot of seeding that gets done on the warm season grasses most of the time. It's usually be coming from a sod or plugs in your lawn. So seeding isn't necessarily as common down in the south for the warm season grasses. So if you do have a lawn though, maybe like centipede that you're seeding or something like that, then this needs to happen as your temperatures are getting warmer and before July 1st preferably. It mentions that here in this article about July 1 as being sort of a deadline there, that if you haven't done it by that point, it might not have enough heat left in the year to mature and get through the rest of the season. So keep those things in mind for warm season. So for the cool season zones, though, a lot of it comes down to fall being the best time for a lot of things in cool season lawns. So if it's getting late here now, especially it's already mid-May, you haven't done any seeding now on a cool season lawn, I probably would not recommend it because we're going to quickly get to summer here. So formulate your plan. You've got a couple months here before the fall time comes, and then you can get a plan going and really get a head start on making sure you have everything in order to do your fall seeding. So I usually do my seeding for cool season lawns around late summer to just the start of September or somewhere around there. For me, that's because my frost date comes about mid-October. And so you got to look at your frost dates and see how far you can stretch that. But when your soil temps are up in the fall here for cool season lawns, you get a lot better germination, a lot quicker on that seed. Also, as you're going down into those cooler temperatures, you're not going to be fighting as much against weeds and things that want to come and invade your new lawn. So I like this here in the article here at the end as far as the primary reasons that spring seeding isn't the best, and that's the primary drawbacks of spring planting are potentially wet conditions, cool temperatures, early spring weeds, and poor summer survival. That pretty much sums it up very well. Next on the list is the numbers on the fertilizer bags don't matter. So when you go look at a number on a fertilizer bag, you're going to see pretty much the big three. It's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, these are all important aspects of a lawn, and just depending on what your soil has already depends on what you need. Now, nitrogen is going to be something that's needed to sort of feed the plant every single year. That part we know we're going to need. Now, as far as phosphorus and potassium go, some soils will have more of these, some will have less, and without doing a soil test, you're sort of guessing at that point what you need. So I've done some videos on soil testing, but if you want to long-term understand what your lawn needs and why those numbers are actually important, a couple things that soil test is going to give you. It's going to tell you your pH, which is important to know because there's a range for turf grass, about 6 to 7 for most grasses, that is the ideal number. Now, if you're over this a little bit or under a little bit, that's okay. It's not like the lawn isn't going to grow. So it's just that if you can get into this ideal range, you're going to have the best turf grass possible in that range of pH. So when you find out that pH, it will help you to make some other decisions on trying to get into that range. So in my example here, I have a pH that's a little over 7. I was also dumping a lot of fertilizer like Milorganite on my lawn for a few years. That contains a pretty good amount of phosphorus. Well, what I found out after the soil test was that I already had a high phosphorus level in my soil. So by continuing to add that nutrient, not only was I pretty much wasting that nutrient at that point, but with an excess phosphorus level, there are some times when that can actually cause some other issues in the lawn and blocking some other things from being used in the soil. So by having the soil test done and by knowing my levels, I'm now able to get a better idea of what I need to add to the lawn. I'm able to use the fertilizers that are going to be best and add the nutrients that I really need. Next on the list, we move to fall here for a second, and that is returning leaves to the lawn in the fall is detrimental to the turf grass. So last year I made a video about this, a quick little video on mulching leaves in the fall, and actually I see a lot of people, even with a small amount of leaves, that are out there raking them up and trying to put them in bags, or maybe they're just mowing with their bag on their mower and getting rid of the leaves. And actually, if you can keep up with mowing these leaves enough to where you can just mulch them back down into the soil and you're not smothering any of the grass, this would be ideal because you're actually returning some of the nutrients back to the soil. There's no reason that you need to remove all of those leaves. Now, if you've got like a 14-inch pile on your lawn and it's smothering everything, then it's going to be pretty difficult to mow through that. But if you can keep up with your mowing often enough as the leaves come down that you can mulch them up, that would be perfect. So you don't need to remove them from the lawn if you can mulch them. You don't have to bag them. You don't have to go out there and rake and do all that stuff. So many people don't know that, but actually returning those leaves to the soil is a great thing. Next one is, like agriculture fields, all lawns must be limed frequently. I see a lot of people too asking me, when have I limed my lawn, or have I done it yet this year? And just talking about pH a little bit ago, my lawn is a 7.3. So if I were to add lime to it, I'm actually going in the wrong direction. A lot of people somewhere got in their mind that lime just needs to be added to a lawn no matter what it is. Especially for me with that pH, I'm actually going to be raising the pH, which I don't want to do by adding lime. So there are places in the country though where lime is needed, and that's where your pH is going to be low and you're trying to raise it up. So that's when you need to use lime in those cases, and when you have a high pH, you definitely don't want to use lime. So why you might see agricultural fields also using lime here, it explains that here in the article. It says agricultural fields often require liming because of the acidifying effect of the fertilizer and hydrous ammonia used in some crop fields, but not in lawns. So I see a lot of this in Iowa here, being a complete farm state, where I see a lot of farmers putting out anhydrous into the soil. And so that would be a little bit different than what we're doing in our lawns. Next thing is shade-tolerant grasses grow well in shade. And I'm not sure I quite like the title of this one because it seems a bit confusing, but what I think they're saying is that many people have a really shaded area in their lawn. They go to the store, they pick up some shade-tolerant grass, and they throw it down there, and it's still struggling, and they're wondering, this is supposed to grow perfectly in shade, what's going on? So grasses, no matter what, still need some sunlight. So if you have a really shady area and you're trying to get grass to grow in there, no matter what, if you don't have light to it, it's just going to be a struggle. So there are some shade-tolerant varieties of different things. There's some grasses that just don't grow well in shade at all, so you need to be aware of those, and you need to be looking up some research in terms of what you want to put in a shady area, but just realize that you need to have some light to it no matter what. So if you can't trim your trees enough to get some actual good light down to there, maybe consider those areas instead as a landscape area. Remember that you don't have to grow grass every single place in your landscape. If there's some areas that you struggle with, then maybe it's best to move that to actual landscape planting instead of trying to grow the lawn. So it mentions that here in the article, and I like that. It says, you're better off planting shade-loving ornaments as opposed to battling non-performing turf. I agree with that as well. There's a lot of people who ask me about what to do right under trees. I can't get anything to grow. There's a root system there from the tree, and sometimes it's just best not to battle it. Those trees are going to take a lot of the nutrients from the soil, and grass just has a lot of struggle to fight with that, to fight with the tree for the nutrients and the lack of light. Also related to shade, something that a lot of people ask me about is moss. Most of the time, if you're thinking about it, if you're seeing a lot of moss, then you either have a lot of shade going on or a lot of moisture. And actually those things go hand in hand, because most of the time, if you have a lot of shade, the lawn is not really going to dry out very much, and you're going to have some excess moisture, especially in a climate like the Pacific Northwest or somewhere that gets a lot of rainfall. Then those two things really go hand in hand there, and you can have some trouble with moss. So then the question I get a lot is, what should I do about that moss? Well, if you're in an area, again, where it's not getting much sunlight, you have to fix that problem. Or if it's getting too much water and not enough drainage, you have to fix that problem as well. Because that moss is giving you some sort of sign there that says if that's growing really well, you need to do something so that the turf grass can actually survive, get more light, get less water there continually, and then you should have some success. Next one on the list is wearing golf spikes when mowing will help to aerate the lawn. So I see quite a few people doing this too, or wearing those little spike shoes when they go out to mow. In this article, they sort of went about it with some math and actually found out that for an average size lawn, you would actually only be aerating about 0.04% of the lawn with those little things. And also with golf spikes, you're really not going into the soil very far at all. Turf grass specialists recommend that to effectively reduce compaction, at least 5% of the soil surface must be aerified. So actually doing a core aeration would be much more beneficial as well, and you're not just using a tine to sort of poke down into the lawn. So this sort of reiterates those things there, that golf spikes or those little aerator shoes are not going to be doing much for your lawn at all. So next one is something that I just recently talked about in a dethatching video, and that is that returning clippings to the lawn will actually cause a thatch issue. So a lot of people say you should bag your lawn, you should never return those clippings because you're going to be adding to thatch. So actually all the way back in the 60s, they did some pretty extensive testing on this and studies on it, found that there was no significant evidence that adding those clippings back into your lawn was causing any thatch. It says here in 1967, researchers at the University of Rhode Island completed and published a detailed study of thatch, finding that it was primarily composed of lignin-containing tissues, which is rhizomes, stolons, and stems, as well as living turf grass roots. Like I have Kentucky bluegrass and mentioned in my dethatching video that sometimes grass types like that just get thatchy on their own. I've returned clippings to it, I've not returned clippings to it, never really found any significant difference in the way that it sort of has thatch there. It just gets to be a really dense sod, gets to have some thatch issues over time. Some of the grasses will not have this as much, it just depends on your grass type, but to reiterate here, there was no significant evidence that was found that returning those clippings actually caused any thatch issues. The last one here on the list is turf grass performs better the more it is irrigated. A lot of people, when they get an irrigation system set up, it's set up to run maybe every day or every other day and for a short amount of time. And I'm not really sure why that has become sort of the standard when an irrigation system's set up, but the best thing you could do would actually be watering more heavily and less frequently. And also, a lawn needs about an inch to an inch and a half water a week, and that's including rainfall in the hotter parts of the year. Now, in the cooler parts of the year, it's very common that it holds on to moisture a lot longer. The sun isn't as intense, the temperatures aren't up, but during that hottest part of the year, an inch to an inch and a half of water per week is usually what the turf needs in order to sort of maintain where it's at. Sometimes certain grasses are even more hungry for water. Sometimes people have a sandy soil in which it needs a little more frequent watering as well because it drains faster. But the best thing that you can do is not water very lightly every single day, but actually change your waterings to heavier waterings less frequently, and also do that in the early morning hours. I usually water somewhere around between 4 to 6 a.m. That's when your evaporation is going to be the lowest, and for me here as well, it's usually when the wind has died down the most. So those are the best types of conditions for watering. So those were some of the lawn myths that I wanted to share with you today. Check out some more videos here at my channel. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.